Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Mulder once again. Hopefully, we have a great show for you tonight. One of my best, closest buddies is on the air right now with me, and his name is Flash. He goes by Flash for this show. And I've known this guy for quite a few decades. And anyway, he and I, we've been working on stuff off and on for, literally for years. And we, tonight he's going to be coming on to, and he's going to discuss this thing called a gasifier, and it's a really interesting history about how this thing got started. Um, and I tell you, Flash, let me go ahead and I guess we'll give everybody a brief history from, from my point of view. Then I'm going to let you take the, take the floor from there. Um, Back, I guess this had to have been like 20, 25 years ago. Um, my I had a father-in-law who was in World War II, and in post Germany, he would, they were riding around their jeeps, trying to clean up everything, and they would see these guys in Mercedes Benz when they have a cart on the back and had like a fire, like a coal fire, or like a it's like a charcoal grill almost on the back of the Mercedes, and just like I said, just pushing around like a cart. And what he noticed was these pipes or these tubes are coming off the top of this whatever this contraption was on the cart, and it's being piped right into the front of the car, right into the engine. And he was thinking, "What the hell, man?" Apparently, they were actually running combustion engines using wood, coal, whatever the hell they could find that could burn. I mean, like I said, there was no gasoline to speak of, and they were just trying to, make things happen. Get things moving, whatever they were, whatever they could use. They were very resourceful. And so a couple of years later, I was going down to a machinist, and Flash and I were working on this little project, and we needed to have some special machine parts. And I was talking to this machinist. He said, "Yeah, all kinds of strange things. People come in here and ask me to build all kinds of strange things. For example, I had this guy that out of Asheville, North Carolina, who came down here and wanted me to machine a couple of parts. And what he was building was basically this the same thing I was describing that they had in Germany. He was building this. He called it a gasifier, and or and so it would burn wood and then would pipe the gases that were coming off that burning wood into the car, and he was driving the car off of it. And I said, "Well, how the hell does this work?" And he said, "It's real simple." So he pulled out his lighter, he lit up a piece of paper, and then he his lighter again, put it right above the flame and of that coming off the paper. And what would happen is the flame coming off the lighter would immediately start to flare up. And he said, "You see that? You see as the lighter's flaring up?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's going on is the gases are coming off that piece of paper that are making it combust, and it's being used by that lighter to increase the flame. All it's doing is just burning the gases coming off that paper." Well, and I was telling Flash about this story, and then it kind of intrigued him, and he decided, what the hell, he's going to try to build one. I think they were having an oil crisis or something, and gas was really getting outrageous, and he decided he would do something really interesting to, see if he become more self-sufficient. So, all right, that's where I stop. That's where you begin. Okay, Flash, what happens?
Okay, something that's going to blow your mind. The conversation that we had about this goes back almost 4 decades, brother. That's how long we've known each other. We've
Oh,
known each other since we were in our 20s. This has
yeah.
happened when I was living in Spartanburg. And, you know, let's say we were doing our activities and festivals that some may shun at those young, tender ages of wildness. But we were sitting in the living room and we were, and you and I had already been working on all sorts of stuff because you were the guy that was financially backing me on electronic parts. I said, "Hey, I'll try these projects, but
Mhm.
it's you come up with the parts, which you funded the money for all the stuff that we needed to do everything with." And just out of the blue, we were sitting there, and you mentioned something about, you know, man, that you were told this story by your father-in-law or somebody about cars, and there's somehow they were running them on wood. Now, your thing that you were telling me about the machinist, I never heard that from you, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
So
how I
I
found.
just said, so
Yeah.
it just shows you how weird things are and how small the world is. So basically, what happened was, back then there was no internet. There was nothing unless you went to a library or you knew somebody. There was no other way out of it. And man, we're talking almost 40 years ago. I actually thought about this conversation today when I was working out and thought, man, almost 4 decades ago, brother. That's how far back this goes. So when YouTube came out, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that. I've started messing around with videos, watching them. I wasn't uploading or anything like that, but I started getting interested in it. And what led me to putting a channel together was there was this guy called Romero UK. That was his name. And he built what was called the Muller motor or something like that, in that term out there, kind of like a Bedini motor, but different, a motor generator. And he was claiming that he was getting this thing to self-run, and not only that, he had excess power to do stuff with. A lot of people way ahead of me jumped on this thing and started building it. And I was intrigued by it. At this time, people were just starting to put it together and trying to prove this thing to work or not work. And this guy had all these stories that he had to disassemble it because he was afraid that they were going to come for him. Yeah, right. And I thought, okay, I can build this thing. This is right down my alley. So I constructed it, tested it out, and there were some interesting things about it. And I used his ideas with his approach with it, and I realized it was total bullshit. And so that's how I became Flash 001 USA, because I called him out by name and basically called him just a bullshitter in a very nice way, but a bullshitter. And of course, a lot of other people were coming around doing it. Well, that video took off. It did quite well. And so after that, I made a couple more electronic videos. Like I discussed magnets. I did one called Know Your Magnets, show people how to make a reference magnet, how to make an electromagnet, and have have a reference magnet, know the difference between north and south pole. Just some very rudimentary, just the most simplest thing you could ever imagine. And it was probably a couple years after that you and I were having the fuel conversation, and we were working with the chemist. We were working with David, and I was looking at setting up alcohol stills to produce fuel for vehicles because, as you mentioned, we were going through a fuel crisis. And, right. This is the second one for me, and it just kind of pissed me off because, it's all criminal. Anybody right. that's out there that knows, the real world, understands it's all a load of crap. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be ways to do this, make fuel. So I was talking to the chemist, and I was in a band with him because I play music. And so I was talking to him about this, and he was like, yeah, we can do this. At first, we were going to make a different kind of alcohol. And I discovered a book called Alcohol Can Be a Fuel. I don't have the gentleman's name in front of me, but I'll probably pop the book up here as an afterthought once I mix this video down. And I heard him, I think, of all places, on Art Bell. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I got the book and actually applied for the license to produce alcohol legally here on the property. I learned everything that I needed to learn about it and what needed to happen. I actually started buying the materials to do it with, which oddly enough became the gasifier. So the more I looked in on it, the more I realized, okay, I don't know about this. I was like, it's going to be a lot of work because when you make alcohol, you got to distill it to like 190 proof. It's got to be very, very high alcohol content for the vehicle to run on it. And I thought, this is more of a hassle than it's worth it because I would have to really produce everything in the warm months to carry me through the cold months. And more I thought about it, the less I was, I guess, motivated to do it. That'd be a good way of putting it. It was then, I don't know why, I couldn't tell you why, but I was thinking about the Muller motor and that guy on that phony baloney setup. And for some reason, the conversation that you and I had in my living room almost 40 years ago came into my mind about running cars off of wood. And I kept imagining, okay, what are you going to do? Shove little wood chunks in the gas tank? I had all this crap going through my mind how it was going to be done. And for some reason, I got lucky. I typed the right words into the YouTube search and um, running engine on wood. And when I did that, everything popped up, and it was like a whole new world opened up for me. I dived into it. I didn't know a damn thing about it, and still, I'm just dangerous because it was all trial and error. I can't say all trial and error because I did talk to some very intelligent people, and they pointed me in the right direction. And there's a lot to it. It's more than just burning the wood to produce it. But
Hmm.
I jumped into it. The first gasifier I built was a FEMA. Luckily, I was smart enough not to run that gasifier through an engine because you got to have certain temperatures. If you don't have the temperatures right, you get tar in the gas. It'll basically it'll clog up the valves and put hard material on the valves. It'll cause all sorts of problems, and you're rebuilding
Right.
the engine.
Right.
And so what I started learning was the FEMA gasifier was meant for just an emergency. They even told you when you did all the research on it, yeah, this will get you some emergency power, but it's not to be a long-term fix because it will destroy whatever engine you're going to put it into.
Right.
So then I discovered the invert gasifier, which is a totally different beast. And that it was made by a German. His last name was Imbert. And this is what you were seeing, or that is your father-in-law was seeing on all these vehicles. Not only were they running automobiles on this, dude, they flew damn planes on this stuff. I can't
I can
make
believe
that
it.
up. And as far as the history of gasification goes, it goes back to the days of the jolly old days of Jack the Ripper. And if you've ever seen the old movies of turn of the century England, even before cars or Europe or whatever, and you see the
Hmm.
guy walking around lighting up all the street lamps, right?
Right.
They're running
Right.
them off wood gas. They had
Ah.
like you'd have a electricity generation station. They had stations everywhere where they had wood, and they were making wood gas and piping it through pipes all through the streets so that it could run up and people could burn it on the streets to light up. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was even utilized for people to burn into their houses to light their houses with gas in the house, possibly
Hmm.
cook, but don't hold me to that. So that's where this all started right there. And, like I said, I got intrigued with it. I built the first one, which was a FEMA. I got the taste of it. And once you're bitten by the bug, as a friend of mine in New Zealand says, once you're bitten by the wood gas bug, it's over with. It's kind of like being bitten by the guitar bug or whatever, going out and playing in clubs bug. It's all the same thing. You know me, man. When I normally do something, I pursue it and I don't stop until I figure it out one way or another.
Hmm.
So I started learning about the invert gasifier. I built one up, and it's a lot more involved than just burning the wood. The wood doesn't actually burn. A good example of a gas fire: a cigarette. A cigarette's got a cherry on the end of it. You puff it, it gets brighter. It's burning. Technically, a cigarette is a gasifier. Now, to produce actual burning fuel and separate that fuel away from it, you got to at least be around 16 to 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. And that starts the process of making clean fuel. Anything below that temperature, you're going to be dealing with tar, which is why I got away from the FEMA because it burns much cooler. So with the invert, they set it up so that they had a hearth in the bottom of this thing, and they had nozzles that would feed into it to bring the air into it. The wood would burn in that hearth. They had what they call a wood hopper above it. As the hearth would burn the wood, it burned like a cigarette cherry, except bright orange. They normally, a good gasifier is going to run between 18 to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure the tars can be broken in. You got to have those hot temperatures. And basically the hopper would fall down. The wood will sink down as it drops. The weight of the wood shoves it into the ember bed down there. It's more than that. The temperature is only part of the equation. You got to have engine displacement. In other words, you got to understand, okay, how much when a piston's drawing back to bring air in from the intake, how much is it pulling a vacuum? And that's part of the displacement. In other words, how much does it have to breathe in? So, and how much air velocity when the engine's running, whatever RPM it is, how much velocity, how fast is the air moving? Because you can be as hot as the sun. You can be hot enough to melt the steel in the gasifier. And if the gas is moving too fast to the ember bed, the tars don't have a chance to break. So it's a game of cat and mouse. You got to have, in other words, you got to design the gasifier to specifications for whatever the engine displacement is, so that there's enough time to break the fuel down and make it safe for the engine. And
Right.
you know, it was involved, and a lot of mine was trial and error, because you can build a port on it and run a digital thermometer up in there that's made for high temperatures, or the old school way was back in the day when your father-in-law seen it. They didn't have, digital meters back in and stuff. They could, it's either going to be a mechanical meter. Most of the time they used a piece of iron rod, and they had a little port. They would shove that iron rod in, it would sit in there. And when the guy would know that it was safe to run the engine, he'd pull the rod out. He would look at how cherry red it was. If he knew it was just a little cherry red, he knew it wasn't hot enough, he was looking for a bright orange rod. And he knew that, well, okay, he's got to be close to 2,000 degrees. It was safe to drive the vehicle. So I started doing it like that. I actually set mine up to run a small engine. And I wasn't concerned about driving on the gas. I wanted to make electricity with it. I went through a lot of work with it. I took a lot of heat from it, no pun intended. And that's because everybody out there was wanting to sell plans. And, everybody would be glad to give you a FEMA gasifier plan and let you destroy your motor with it. But everybody wanted $50, $100 for plans. And Wayne Keith, who has a website, he's done this for years, drive on wood gas. I get it, because he was giving something people that they could drive a full-size truck on wood gas. And so he went to sell those plans. He went through all that trouble. I don't blame him. But to sell people plans from people you never heard of, oh, I'll show you how to build one up. No, that's all right. I found a lot of people online that were willing to answer questions to me, and people that, a couple of universities actually. I reached out to universities and people that were doing this stuff, and they answered questions. And so basically it was trial and error for me. But when I got my gasifier working, I did a lot of run time with it, and the rest is history with it. And it's kind of funny because you get stereotyped. My channel took off. I still got a baby channel on YouTube, and I probably got, I don't know, 10,000 subscribers. I've had at least a couple million views on all my videos put together, because my stuff is more than just gasifiers. I look at my channel as an open diary. It's just hey, this is what I did today. And, but I did the gasifier stuff. That's what launched the channel, really made it take off. Man, I made friends literally all over the world. And I've got good friends now all over the country, all over the world, that I talk to through messages on, every other day. And so you talk about people making pen pals. I kind of made modern day pen pals and some good acquaintances doing this. And I'm sure you can relate to that with the stuff you do too.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, anyhow, it took off. I made my last videos a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but I showed people how I did it. And I asked everybody that was asking me questions, said, well, look, build this thing. And a lot of people build it. And that's how I made all these friends. I said, look, let's get a community going here. I started a website called miniwoodgas.com. And I said, let that be a place. Anybody has questions, they can come up here and they can learn from what we did. They can learn from our channels. But any improvements we make on it, let's share with each other, make this thing better, right, which is what we did. A couple of these people that I dealt with, when I say they're off grid, I mean, brother, they're off grid. This is what they do. This is how they make their electricity. They don't have any kind of wiring coming to their house other than for their generators, their solar, and their wood gas, and whatever else they're using. And for me, the wood gas was an absolute fail-safe. So if I didn't have fuel or didn't have any way of producing electricity, that I could fall back on it. By God, I know I could produce electricity, and I watched me do it, and I know it works. That's about the best way I can put it to you.
Right.
You got any questions? I mean,
sure. Yeah, I mean, the main thing is, okay, most people are asking, okay, if I decide to build this thing, what do I need to be concerned with? I mean, are there any off the shelf parts, or do I have to have a lot of this stuff fabricated, or do I have to, I mean, what do I got to do here? I mean, could you
You can
give,
make it off the shelf.
okay,
You can make it off the shelf, man. Remember I told you that I had all those barrels for producing alcohol in?
right,
That's what became my first couple of gasifiers. I had the 55-gallon drums. Um, I took, what was it? It was I had a small, um, it was a propane tank, but it wasn't a grill tank. It was like twice the size of one of those. I think it stood like 3 feet tall, and that became my wood hopper. Now
okay,
you do have to have a little bit of fabrication abilities to be able to cut the metal and work with some stuff. And so that was the hardest part for me when I first built it. I had never worked with steel in my life or any kind of metal. Although I knew how to acetylene weld, I had never used any kind of stick welders or any kind of MIG welders or TIG welders or anything like that. And so I was flying by the seat of my pants, literally.
mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I learned this stuff. I had to teach myself to weld just to even do it. But when I done it, it wasn't that difficult. But anybody that would want to try this, they could go to my YouTube channel. I show exactly how it's done, and not only that, I've got all of the plans how to build this thing. Had a
Mm-hmm.
gentleman, he's deceased now, but one of the people that I knew, he took it and worked with me, and he drew all the plans up, did it in a CAD program how to build it, and I did wind up making it automated on my end because I do the electronic stuff. So I did all the drawings and showed everybody how to do the automation on it. That's another can of worms there. We'll get into in a minute. But
Okay,
I showed everybody how to do all that. Anybody that's interested, all they got to do is reach out to me, and I'll have that in the video how they can get a hold of me also. I'm more than glad to share the plans with them. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, basically that's what it comes down to is just, you got to sit down and have some basic skills. If not, you can always go to find somebody that can do it for you. And there's no elaborate parts. I mean, a 55-gallon drum, you could even use a 30-gallon drum if you wanted to build it smaller. The whole thing is basically we put together out of junk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just, and I'm going to tell you something. Making wood gas and making it correctly so that an engine could run on it without damaging it is like driving a straight drive. Either you know how to drive a straight drive or you don't. Good
Right.
example would be I can give somebody the keys to a regular car that's automatic. They can drive it. I can turn around now and tell them, boy, look, I got this 18-wheeler from 1970s, and it's got multiple gears in it. Well, hey, man, you should be able to drive it, dude. It's got a steering wheel. It's got a horn. You can blow it, and it's got a windshield. But no, you're not going to get in that truck and drive it any more than you would a straight drive car, man, without making the thing jump and shut down. But wood gas is a funny beast. And, well, anything is. That's why their gasoline at the pumps is so stringent, they got 87, 89, and 91, 93, or whatever octanes, and they got vehicles that are built around this to make sure that when you go gas, if it's in your state or out of state or wherever you're driving, that your vehicle will run the same. Now, I had mentioned to you that with wood gas, that you have to have engine displacement or air velocity moving through the system to make sure that you achieve two things, that you receive the following, that you get the temperatures hot enough to crack the tar, and that the air movement is slow enough to allow the tar to be cracked in there, yet you have enough air movement that you can supply the engine without starving it. And that's the critical thing right there. So, when you're doing this, you got to keep all this stuff in the back of your mind. This is where it comes into learning to drive straight drive when you're working with a gasifier. I have seen people go out, and you can spend thousands of dollars on gasifiers. I've seen people go out and spend a couple $1,000s on the best gasifiers money can buy and turn around and produce crappy gas and damage their engines. I've seen people on YouTube that had gasifiers that were made with gutter pipe, and it looked like it was going to fall apart. If you looked at it the wrong way, it would just fall apart and produce the best gas you ever seen. That's because they had the feel for the machinery. And that's what you
Yeah.
got to learn, because everything, it's not only just that, you just can't stick any kind of wood into a gasifier. It's got to be dried. It's got to be, I want to shoot, man, I'm going to probably tell you wrong. I want to say between 3%, 5-7% water content in the wood, no more than that. Anything in that, then you'll get a lot of humidity, and that'll cause the tar to come into the gas. And there's ways to work. There's workarounds to get the water out of the fuel, and that's in how you cool it down. And you could even have some simple filtering going on, and that'll capture some of the water as the gas cools. It's air conditioning 101. You can run it, and I made an expansion tank on mine, and it's different from the way people do theirs. They make cyclones. I did mine with an expansion tank, which is just a big tank. My pipe coming into it from the raw gas produced was going through a 3-inch pipe. It would go through and hit another propane cylinder that was a 3-foot tall cylinder, and the gas could expand. It's just like an air conditioner. You know how they work. You get the high pressure sprays, and it goes into a larger pipe, which lets it freeze and get ice cold, and that's the part that blows the cold air out. Okay. So the gas could expand in this tank. It would immediately let it cool down. I had extra pipes coming off of it to let the gas get it really cold. This caused a couple of things to happen. First of all, it got the gas temperature down, which makes it more robust as a gas. It allowed the water vapor in the gas, along with particles, to drop into the bottom of the tank, and you could drain it out as water, and you could do less filtering on this thing too. As a matter of fact, with my cheesy setup, which I do on my videos, I tell people, watch this. I can blow the flame out, and when it's going through the filtering and going through all the tanks, it's clear. It's like it's invisible. And I know when I run gas into an engine like that, I am not concerned about damaging that engine.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
So
exactly.
I just talked your ear off, and for that I apologize.
No, man. You're the expert on the subject. That's the reason why I'm letting you talk. I mean, this is just something. I know there are people out there that are looking for other ways of doing things. And really, what you're describing this thing, it's not really a science. It's an art. Like you said,
it is an
a
art.
feel for it. Yeah, it's an art. And, yeah, we've worked on a lot of projects over the years, but this thing right here, like you said, it's one of those deals where there's a lot of tweaking involved. And, I think you kind of got it down pat on how to do this thing. And again, this is just one of those things where, I wanted to show people there are other ways of making combustion engines run. Because, we're always, as well as I do, we've had conversations about this off the air about how basically all this oil shortage or fossil fuels, that's all a bunch of bullshit too. I mean, we're up to our eyeballs in oil, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, there's like a 400-year supply of oil for the United States at present rate of consumption up in Alaska right now. That doesn't include what we have here inside the continental United States or offshore. And it's just a joke. It's just a joke. It's like what they did with diamonds. Diamonds are so plentiful that people, if they were to release everything they mined or they found, it'd be like costume jewelry. It would be worthless. But they control.
That blows my mind to hear that said, because I know that's right. I've actually heard other shows on that, and I wish people would wake up, because the truth is, not only were we lied to, but our great grandpappy and your great grandma that wore combat boots, we've all been lied to going back. Since the beginning of, I guess, people crawling out of caves and probably got lied to in caves. It's enough to piss you off. I'm sorry.
Hey, no, you're fine. You're fine. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. And the reason why they fake scarcity, number one, is control the population, number one, and number two is control the price. If people truly knew how plentiful energy was, they would be in the streets raising holy hell. There's no reason why we should be paying any more than 50 cents a gallon for gas right now. It's that plentiful. But it's controlled. It's controlled. And it's just like what you're talking about right there. Yeah, I mean, is it something? Is it the right solution for everybody? No. Number one, you got to have be able to be a little crafty. You have to be able to know how to use your hands, or at least have friends that are metal workers, or can do some of the things that need to be done. And then even after you build the entire contraption, Then you got to basically study on how to, like you said, the right combinations of airflow, coals, the heat, all these things. Filter, make sure that everything's properly broken down or is properly filtered. So by the time that gas hits your engine or hits your generator or whatever, it's not going to go kapooey. And I mean, there's a lot involved here, But what I enjoy is it's the fact that you're able to take something, just somebody with a little bit of initiative and a little bit of craftsman, or just being, being good with their hands and being a little crafty, are able to actually build something that truly works. Because I've seen this thing work myself. I mean, there's no joke. This thing will run a electric, like a standard Honda generator or any kind of a gasoline generator with very few modifications. And another thing too, if memory serves, because you're burning gas through that two-cycle engine or whatever it may be, it's burning cleaner because there's no carbon buildup because you're providing clean fuel. It's like a propane.
It is like a propane, provided it's done correctly. And the only modification you don't take I know some people do this. I don't do this, but you build an external carburetor, and you take the intake as far as the air filter intake off the original carburetor. You marry it to that, and then you can put your filter on the external carburetor. This way, you can run the engine off of wood gas or gasoline, and I even show how to build the carburetors as far as the wood gas carburetors, all the videos. And I'm going to show, explain this to everybody right now, that when I upload this video, somewhere in here, I'm going to have some links to everything. I try to put everything in order. People can watch it. They can go through it all. And I'm not the best explaining to this. I would be now that I've done it. But like I said, when I was doing this, I was flying by the seat of my pants when I was doing it. Luckily, I fell through the right cracks. I made it happen. And I shared what I did with everybody. And apparently enough people seen it and goes, hey, this is doable. This guy's doing it. So I got lucky. And plus, like you said, you got to be in the right area. Like where I live here, I'm on 10 acres of land. I can go out, the wood that you want to put in it, you want wood that's extremely seasoned, extremely dry. Well, guess what? I go out to my woods and I can find branches that fell on the ground that were up in trees for a year or two that died. And they're nice and crispy and totally dried out. And I can bring them back and cut them up. And I even got a video where I said, explain to people, I'm going to show you something here where I'm running an engine, and I slammed down a bucket and said, off of sticks. And I said, it had sticks out of the yard. And I just find that kind of humorous. Hey, and my thing is, hey, if I can do this, you got to ask yourself a question. You see all these fields with that are overrun by kudzu and everything. The states should set it up where people go out and they have a cleanup thing. That I know landowners would love to have this happen. Go out and harvest all the bad stuff, all the kudzu, anything that you can burn, you can gasify it. So go out and get all the kudzu, all that stuff, like in the wintertime when it's all crispy brown. Go out, get shrub trees and all that stuff. And you could run all sorts of towns off of wood gas. And the thing about it is, it doesn't have a carbon footprint. What people don't realize is another lie you're being told by the great ones, whoever they are. When you burn wood gas, okay, this is basically what you're doing. If you let that tree sit on the ground and rot and go into the ground, it's going to release the same amount of greenhouse gases or other stuff back into the atmosphere that it would if you run it through a gasifier. It's got a zero carbon footprint, in other words. And so you could have all these cities and towns that could utilize this. They could beautify any areas that were overrun that needed to be cleaned up. Instead, I see construction sites where they build and they go and they take all the trees and put them in a pile and they burn them or halfway bury them. I'm thinking to myself, man, what a waste. You could create jobs like this, but you're right. The same people that don't want to let you know about a lot of stuff, they don't want nobody knowing about this. Now there are other countries, smaller countries, where they use coconuts, they use the shells off of them. They use all sorts of stuff, and they run towns off of them, and they do just fine. But it's a damn shame. We're supposed to be one of the greater nations in the world, and it's a hoax. It's a joke.
Yeah.
And the joke is on us, people. That's all I can tell you. The joke is on us. And
Yeah.
you talking about, I did everything out of necessity.